In our last video, we looked at the actions of Carlos Smith on the day that Romeca Blackmon was killed. We know he was there. We know he drove the car. And I've seen thousands of you in the comments saying, that's a conspiracy. Arrest him. But we can't go there yet without talking about the reality of the courtroom. Driving someone to a scene of a crime is not conspiracy in and of itself. So today we're going to talk about the burden of proof. I'm going to show you why conspiracy is one of the hardest charges for a prosecutor to make stick, and why the state might be moving slowly to ensure they don't lose the case before it even starts.
They say the defendant has the right to remain silent. Good, because in a criminal case, the burden was never yours to carry in the first place. The prosecution bears the burden of proof, not kind of, not mostly, entirely. They have to prove every single element of the crime beyond a reasonable doubt. That means the defendant does not have to prove innocence, does not have to testify, does not have to explain, and does not have to help the state complete its case. And that's where criminal defense gets surgical. You weaponize the burden by forcing prosecution to prove everything: identity, intent, possession, knowledge, causation, every element. If they miss one, they lose. No fingerprints? Problem. No clear intent? Problem. Bad identification? Problem. Broken chain of custody? Problem. Because suspicion is not proof. An accusation is not proof. And he probably did it is not proof. The Constitution says if the state cannot remove reasonable doubt, the verdict must be not guilty.
To get a conspiracy conviction, the state has to prove what we call a meeting of the minds. That's actually a legal term, and we introduced that term in part 1. But let's explore what it really means. It's not enough to show that Carlos Smith was there.
But I was there, and I know for a fact none of that happened, how they just explained it. But my truth will get out here.
The prosecution has to prove that there was an agreement between Carlos and Quadajah Johnson to commit this specific crime. Think about it this way. If Carlos says, I thought I was just driving her car to transfer our son so she could leave, and the state can't prove otherwise, the conspiracy charge fails right there. To win, the prosecutor needs evidence of the plan before the first shot was ever fired. This is why investigators are likely tearing through every text message, every DM, and every call log between Carlos and Quadajah. They have to find that one message where the plan was confirmed. Without that meeting of the minds, it's just presence, but not a plot. We've discussed things like the CCW insurance policy or the timing of the TPO against Romeca as proof. But in the legal world, that is considered circumstantial evidence. Yeah, it suggests a motive, but it doesn't prove the agreement to obtain those things. Direct evidence would be a credible witness who heard them planning it, or a video of them buying the weapon together. This is where the Carlos effect gets complicated. If Carlos claimed that he was under duress or simply unaware of what Quadajah had in her car, the state has to work twice as hard to prove that he's lying. They don't want to charge Carlos and have a jury find him not guilty because the evidence was too thin. In the law, you only get one real shot at this. This is another reason why the delay that we're seeing could actually be a sign of a deep investigation. Cell phone forensics can take months. Remember, it took months before Quadajah was arrested. Authorities have to look at more than just the text messages that Carlos and Quadajah sent each other. They also look at location data. And remember, it's been reported that the TextNow app was used in this case. TextNow numbers do offer a degree of anonymity to the general public, but they're not completely untraceable for investigators. So they have to go on to find out if they scouted the school in the days or weeks before the shooting happened. Did they stop somewhere to prep? Every time Carlos's phone pings near Quadajah's in the days leading up to the ambush, the state will be building a map of that meeting of the minds. They have to wait for the data to tell the story that Carlos won't ever tell. The state needs a case so tight that no defense attorney, especially attorney Ari Williams, can wiggle out of. I know it's frustrating because we want to see accountability now, but a rushed charge often leads to a dismissed case. The state's not just looking for a headline, they're looking for a conviction, one that holds up on appeal. So I'm putting it back to y'all. Knowing how high the bar is for a conspiracy charge, do you think the digital evidence is going to be enough to put Carlos in an orange jumpsuit? Or do you think his defense of just being a driver will hold up in court? Now you see the high bar that the prosecution has to clear in order to prove a conspiracy. It's not just about what we see on camera, it's about what they can prove in a digital forensics lab.
Digital evidence doesn't just exist in a case. It's built, it's extracted, and it's packaged. And here in 2026, it's the backbone of a lot of criminal prosecution. So when law enforcement uses your phone, your accounts, or your data against you, there's a very structured process behind it. Let's break this down into steps. So step one, they'll get legal access. It usually starts with legal process like search warrants, subpoenas, or your consent. For physical devices like your phone, that's typically going to be a search warrant. But for third-party data like Google, Apple, or social media, that's usually going to be a subpoena or a warrant under federal statutes. Step two is going to be data extraction. So once they have access, they don't just scroll through your phone. They're going to use forensic tools. These tools create a forensic image, which is a structured copy of your data, basically. And that can include things like deleted messages. It can include app data. It can include your location history and the metadata that's tied to files and activity. Then after that, in step three, they're going to go to cloud and providers like iCloud. And at the same time, investigators are pulling records directly from providers. That's going to be text logs, not always content, but timestamps and contacts. It can be account activity. It can be IP logs. It can be stored files and backups. And this builds a second layer of evidence independent of your device. Then after that, we'll call it step four. They're going to start building a timeline. Then it all gets merged. Investigators will create a timeline with device activity, location data, communications, account access, and this is how they turn the raw data into a narrative.
But there's one more piece to the puzzle that we haven't touched on yet. The witness factor. What happens if Carlos is not a defendant, but the state's star witness instead? In the final part of this series, we'll be looking at immunity versus indictment. We're going to investigate if a deal has already been made behind closed doors. Is Carlos Smith walking free because he's innocent or because he's the key to convicting Quadajah Johnson? If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who can use this message. Stay tuned for the conclusion of Can Carlos Smith Be Charged? And subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Leave a comment down below and let me know your thoughts. Then meet me in the comments. We can continue the conversation there.